Hey Chris, how you doing this morning?
Hi, Ron. Doing great. How about yourself?
Doing great. Well, today we're going to do part one of either a two or a three-part series. It's going to be a really fun topic. We do a lot of HIPAA, and you guys have probably seen some of our HIPAA videos. And we get a lot of questions about GDPR. And now, especially because we're also in the commerce space, we get a lot of questions about CCPA and how they differ. And then everybody, and probably half of you listening and go, well, we've heard of GDPR, but what's CCPA? So that's really what today's is what the heck is the GDPR? What does it stand for? What does it generically mean? What is the CCPA? What is it? How does it affect? And are they overlapping? How do they differ? Are they even related? Right. And so that's today's topic. So I'm going to start out by throwing the ball over into your court and going, what the heck is GDPR? What does it stand for? And generically, what is a GDPR or what is the GDPR?
Yeah, so GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation, and this is essentially the EU's privacy protection laws that really help protect against data challenges, data sharing, and just consumer privacy, essentially. Everyone's probably seen the cookie consents that show up on different sites, allowing cookies and what they can track. Just very, very fundamentally, this law went into effect on May 25th of 2018. And generally speaking, it provides for a opt-out, a sort of like a right to basically confirm before your data gets brought into anything. So the company has to actually get your consent before they can use your data. And we're going to be talking about CCPA later, which is more of a opt out after the fact, sort of like a access to what's being used and shared of your information, but you don't have to approve it before they can use it, kind of a thing. So GDPR is a little bit different. It's more stringent upfront with requiring businesses to literally get your permission before they can use your data. Now, this is pretty interesting because it does include a lot of information. So some examples would be, of course, name and email address that might be used on a site, but also data that you may not be aware is being tracked, like your location, your browser history, information about your machine that they can get through your browser, and a lot more. So there's a lot of data that can be sort of correlated and then sold, and then you can be identified and marketed to because you were on a web page on a site that a lot of people want to buy leads for. And so now all of a sudden your phone blows up with spam. Well, the intent of GDPR is to help reduce that. And similarly, prevent your data from being spread all over the internet, not just for marketing purposes, but also for more, challenging situations like medical data or financial data, and making sure that this information is properly, rigorously safeguarded from a security standard perspective. And so without going into all of the detail, the summary is it is a really rigorous upfront process that businesses have to follow in order to use your data. And it's really basically any of the things that I cited and a lot more. We'll show a screen just of some of the example pieces of data that are encompassed in GDPR, but it's really a lot. So if you're operating in the EU or you have visitors that are going to, be visiting from the EU, or there's any kind of revenue going through EU, et cetera, you really want to be cognizant of that. And we just generally recommend that businesses comply with GDPR, and try to do it in a elegant and subtle way on their site, but go ahead and comply with it. You don't want to get caught up in regulation and litigation around not complying with it, right, Ron?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the fines can be pretty steep. I was going to save the fines for when we deep dive into GDPR in number two, but I mean it can be 2 to 4% of the company's previous year's revenue, depending on how bad it is. So it can be pretty steep.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing about GDPR is that GDPR is supposedly a global. So if anybody deals with any company from the EU, so the way the EU put it together, it's like this is a protection for everybody within the EU. If anybody wants to do business with anybody that lives within the EU, And that's why Chris is saying, if I'm here in the US and I bring up a website and I want to sell globally, somebody in France is protected by this regulation when they're purchasing on my website. And if I don't comply, they will come after me. I mean, that's what it means. So it's a global initiative. And the other thing that I found interesting when doing some research is that it's tech neutral. It's not just online. It's mail, it's everything. So there's no regard to tech. So it applies to direct mail and other things as well. So it's a very interesting thing. It can even apply to brick and mortar for people traveling and visiting and doing other stores and selling. It applies there as well. So GDPR is quite in depth. It's going to take quite a bit for us to go through it. We've got a couple website URLs for you to help digest it and how to handle it. Now the other one, let's go on to the one that we want to compare it to, the CCPA. Everybody's wondering what the heck the CCPA is. So Chris, tell us what the CCPA is. Absolutely. And then we can kind of, we'll do just a real high level of what it applies to and, what are kind of the outline of the premise of it. And then we'll do our deep dive on that one in the next one as well.
Awesome. So CCPA is the California Consumer Privacy Act. And this one is pretty interesting. It's similar. You'll see a lot of similarities between CCPA and GDPR, but they are not the same. Yeah. The CCPA has an interesting sort of set of differences. The way to summarize it in general is that it's more of an opt-out. So people have the right to see where their information is being used, and they have the right to opt out. But they don't have to give their permission for that information to be used. And generally speaking, the requirements for both of these, there generally is a threshold of some kind. In the case of the CCPA, it's generally based on your revenue being a certain amount. So that's helpful to know. If complying with some of these is going to be challenging for your business, you may not have to comply with them yet. You may want to just start getting ready. But depending on what your business operations are, it may be necessary if you're collecting a bunch of data and selling it. But otherwise, if you're just operating your business, it's generally true that if you're under 25 million in top line revenue, then you don't have to focus on it. So it is targeted at businesses that are larger. But again, just like the GDPR, it protects personal information. And generally it's a little different in that whereas the GDPR is going to be protecting what I would refer to as individual information, the CCPA is more focused on household information. So it's not just the individual, but all of the information within a household. So that might include more demographics about that location or income levels for the household, or different people in the household. You get the idea. And so again, there has to be a way to notify the user, give them that opt-in or opt-out capability in particular, give them that transparency into what their data is being used for, and allow them to go through a process that's basically self-service to opt out of being incorporated in that. And so that's, in a nutshell, some of the basics of CCPA. Again, just like GDPR, there are some really nice turnkey software solutions that we can implement, whether you're working with us or if you're working with another software vendor, that are very low cost and very, low key on the site. So any kind of platform that you're hosting, we recommend doing something that's low overhead, that gets the job done and is very, simple and intuitive for your users. Any thoughts on that, Ron, as well?
Yeah. So, CCPA, like you said, is a very interesting one. You were mentioning how it expands into the household. It does. It expands into the household and the other devices. So this one is actually more targeted at protecting the data on your phone and protecting things like that, right? Additional devices and tablets and things like that. it is limited to California residents. I mean, this is something the state of California did to protect their consumers. And that's why they called it Consumer Privacy Act. Now, the mainstay about the consumers, where it really differs, in my opinion, from GDPR, GDPR is about all data of all people within the EU in all scenarios. Calling a consumer a patient, a consumer really isn't the way a patient plays. And that's how California is different. California is not trying to go after the doctors and say, doctors, you can't have the medical data about Ron to treat Ron and his stuff, and you have to handle the data. The EU and the GDPR is going after that medical data. Non-commercial data is not included in the CCPA. So healthcare data largely is not included. Now, if I wanted to take that healthcare data and go to a doctor's office and say, hey, I sell insulin, I would like a list of all your patients so that I can go market to them because I have a cheaper insulin, that violates now, because now both of us have crossed that line, right? The hospital's selling your data because now they're selling it for a commercial purpose of me trying to market to you to sell a different drug, even though it might be in your best interest. That now has turned a medical services need for that data into a marketing commercial need for that, or use, not need, use for that data. And that's when you cross the line. So the CCPA is very different. But anyway, in just part one, we wanted to be relatively quick today. We wanted to just do a quick intro, show you guys what the GDPR is generically, what the CCPA is, what they even stand for, how they differ. And then in the next one or two, it kind of depends how long it goes when we dive into the GDPR, whether we'll have to break that into two or not. We want to keep them digestible for you. We'll do that. Anything you want to tie off, Chris? Otherwise, everyone, thanks for watching today. Please hit the like button. Thanks again for all your comments, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye for now.